Okay, so maybe the title of this video is kind of a lie. Pom Poko is less Isao Takahata's Princess Mononoke and more Isao Takahata's Over the Hedge plus Bruce Willis raccoon to the 10th power minus every other animal in the movie minus Verminator plus balls times the CEO of sex. I got straight A's in all my math classes, including AP Calculus, so I know what the fuck I'm talking about. Don't at me, bitch. However, when I said that the title of this video is kind of a lie, that was also kind of a lie. And just like how two negatives make a positive, two kinds of lies create one absolute truth. That Pom Poko is Isao Takahata's Princess Mononoke. Congratulations, you survived your first day of Kim Jong-un 101 class. That combines math, philosophy, and anime, the sexiest threesome your sorry, disgusting ass will ever be a part of. I don't know why I said that. But there's an asterisk to that statement, because by no means am I saying that Pom Poko and Princess Mononoke are the same movie. Fuck no. If you've ever seen both films or just don't have blindness, then you're aware that they are very different stylistically, narratively, and tonally, because Miyazaki has always been drawn towards the fantastical, while Takahata has always been interested in telling more grounded stories. There's an element of realism evident throughout Takahata's work that makes him stand out, unlike other Ghibli filmmakers who, when directing their own projects, end up just making pale imitations of Miyazaki's films. Takahata's approach to directing and presenting his anime films under a more grounded and realistic lens, choosing to be, in many ways, the tonal opposite of his colleague slash friend, helps him not only craft his own identity in a studio that's basically become synonymous with old Grunkle Miyazaki, but it also establishes him as simply one of the finest directors with his own unique voice. Now, the reason why I'm bringing any of this shit up is because it all comes back to that central statement that I lied slash not lied about. Pom Poko is Isao Takahata's Princess Mononoke because they're essentially about the same thing. At their cores, both films are about environmentalism, the crucial need to protect nature from excessive industrialization and deforestation. These films are made by artists who very much love nature, who adore all the beauty and creatures that call it their home, but they also aren't stupid to believe that the consumption and industrialization that are fueled by humanity's need to consume and provide for their loved ones are like pure acts of evil. They're not defined by black and white morality, and this results in movies that have very nuanced, bittersweet takes on this topic. However, what differentiates these two films is how they approach this shared theme. These are environmental movies in which their respective creators take a bit of inspiration from each other's styles and sensibilities, but at the end of the day, what they have to say and how they say it is what makes Princess Mononoke a uniquely Miyazaki environmental film, while Pom Poko a uniquely Takahata one. I already made a video about Princess Mononoke, so just go watch that if you're interested in hearing my detailed thoughts, so let's instead focus our attention on this video's main topic, Pom Poko. You know, the thing you showed up for, but I haven't directly talked about for like 3 minutes at this point. Pom Poko is a very interesting and unique film, especially amongst Ghibli's catalog, because unlike almost every other movie this studio has released, this one doesn't really have a central protagonist. We instead follow this unified confederacy of shape-shifting raccoons with very large ball sacks, in which we jump back and forth between a series of characters who each have their own respective beliefs and journeys. In my opinion, it seemed like Takahata was trying to go for a nature documentary type story vibe with a third-person narrator and a lot of ambient scenes of nature, and while I don't think he quite succeeded if he was going for something like that, it more than makes up for its flaws with its gorgeous animation, its ability to balance comedic levity, emotional sweetness, and heartbreaking drama, and most importantly, its insistence on highlighting the arduous struggles and the harsh reality that often comes when fighting for noble causes like protecting nature. On the surface, Pom Poko appears to be a family-friendly anime movie that's channeling the same energy as something like, I don't know, Crayon Shinshin or Doraemon, in which we follow the silly, cute raccoons get into a series of shenanigans and goofs where everyone is happy and cheerful and everything seems to work out in the end. And while those whimsical and fantastical elements are still major aspects of the film both tonally and aesthetically, like with his other movies, Takahata uses these attributes to his advantage by drawing in his audience with the fun and whimsy before confronting them with the more grounded and realistic narrative elements that are prominent throughout his filmography. What I really love and admire about Pom Poko as both a film and a political piece is that it does not attempt to sugarcoat or downplay just how difficult it is to make long-lasting, meaningful change, especially when it comes to environmental concerns. When we're first introduced to these raccoons, they get their first taste on the destruction humans can cause via deforestation and their efforts to create new suburbs and apartments for people to live in. The first thing they do is fight amongst themselves for what's left of the forest. There's this action set piece in which these two raccoon factions transform into these samurai warriors and start duking it out against each other with big sticks, and while on the surface this is fun and cute to watch, it also does a great job showcasing just how unprepared they are when confronting with a huge existential threat like this. Their first instinct is to compete against each other for the remaining land and food still available that hasn't been destroyed by humans, and the only reason they even stop is because the matriarch interrupts the battle and gives everyone a huge reality check. She reminds everyone that this issue of human beings coming in to radically destroy, transform, and occupy their lands is something that affects every raccoon no matter what, and so naturally they should stand together when dealing with this problem instead of just splintering into different factions. However, even though the raccoons end up agreeing with the matriarch and unite as one single confederacy, this still doesn't resolve the underlying issues of 1. What's the best way of confronting this looming threat of mass deforestation and migration of humans, and 2. How can they ensure this stops forever after they find that solution? While there is still a faction of raccoons that would prefer to fight the humans head-on with violence, a majority instead agree that the best answer is to scare them off using their mystical shape-shifting powers, an ability that most actually have to relearn because it's a tradition that was long forgotten and only remembered by a select few, most of whom are the elderly. Eventually, once several raccoons get a hold of their shape-shifting ability, they then carry out their plan of stopping the humans at all costs, whether it's sabotaging construction, creating accidents that lead to injuries and even deaths, and scaring away construction workers by pretending to be ghosts or spirits. However, whatever small victories these attempts bring, they never last long as the deforestation/construction project never stops, and more humans just show up to take the places of those who left. It puts the raccoons in this never-ending cycle of using their shape-shifting powers, accomplishing their initial goals, more humans showing up and construction never stopping, which ends up creating more problems, which then forces the raccoons to do this same shit all over again. This never-ending cycle is nothing less than frustrating and soul-crushing, and these are emotions that not only we, the audience, feel as the film goes on, but also what the characters themselves feel as well. Just when everything seems to be going okay, a shitstorm rains down on their parade, pushing them back to square one, and no matter what they do or how hard they try, things always just seem to get worse, which slowly drains their spark to fight. It's interesting that Takahata approaches the story and subject this way because he frames the talking raccoons not as some helpless species that need to be saved by some dumbass human savior, but as sentient humanoid creatures that do everything in their power to protect the forest because they are entitled to a home that fulfills their needs and desires. They have just as much a claim to the land that the humans are bulldozing and terraforming, who aren't even portrayed in the film as evil mustache-twirling villains because they in turn are fueled by their own desires to satisfy their needs and provide housing for as many of their kind as possible. This ultimately makes Pom Poko a very interesting film because it presents itself as not just an environmental story, but a cultural and human rights one as well. You can see a lot of parallels between the raccoons and pretty much every other indigenous population that were either pushed out or forcibly assimilated by a colonizing force that showed up to their doorsteps, claimed the land the indigenous people lived on, and then transformed it into something more akin to the colonizers' culture and way of life, while completely destroying the culture and way of life that previously existed. In the case of Pom Poko, there is more at stake than just trees and pretty nature. The forest isn't just a place, it's their home. It's a sustainable environment that has properly fed and housed its people for centuries, and now all of that is just completely disappearing because of the mass deforestation and industrialization caused by humans. The development of these mass urban cities and suburban houses isn't just a threat to the raccoons' homes and way of life, it also risks cultural genocide. Near the second half of the film, one of the raccoon elders meets a clan of shape-shifting foxes whose numbers are incredibly small and have only survived for this long because they made the conscious decision to use their shape-shifting powers to assimilate into human culture, while also leaving the foxes who couldn't shapeshift to fend for themselves and be left to die. While it may have been unintentional, the humans forced the foxes to basically undergo social Darwinism. To quote the Greek historian Thucydides, "The strong do what they can, while the weak suffer what they must." It's an incredibly sad reality, but this is what the foxes had to do to survive, and unfortunately this is a fate that the raccoons are forced to accept as well, but we'll come back to this in a second. In the second half of the film, the three elder raccoons that the characters sent help for finally arrive, and the trio convinces them that the only way they can stop the human expansion for good is if they combine their spiritual and shape-shifting powers to create a ghost parade to not only trick the humans into thinking the land they're constructing and living on is not only haunted by the supernatural, but also to reaffirm respect for the raccoons, or tanuki as they're referred to in the film. This leads to arguably not only the best scene in the entire film, but also just one of the most gorgeous moments in animation history. The humans, and by extension the audience, are immersed in this visual feast of striking imagery and abstract surrealism that feels reminiscent of something like a Masaki Yuasa film. This scene alone is worth an entire fucking video essay on, but anyway, the main point that is being communicated in this scene is that this is the full power of the raccoons. This is what they are truly capable of when united under and committed to one singular noble goal of protecting their homes and preserving their culture and way of life from the humans. Unfortunately, all that strength, spirituality, and spark that the raccoons had and exerted, they were ultimately in vain. At the end, it was a completely wasted effort, because not only does the ghost parade get one of the elders killed, but it also doesn't even work because a theme park owner simply takes credit for it, claiming that it was just a publicity stunt. The raccoons put all their chips into this this one plan, and now that it's completely backfired, they don't know what to do anymore. This is when everything completely goes downhill as one by one, different factions start breaking apart from the Confederacy, each with their own desperate plan to save their kind in the forest they call home. The more violent faction wants to wage war against the humans, specifically the police, but that ends up being completely fucking worthless because they all just get themselves killed. Another faction attempts to gain the attention of the press by getting a reporter to conduct an interview with them, begging them to stop the construction, but that ends up going nowhere too. There's one faction consisting of one of the elder raccoons that becomes senile and a bunch of raccoons who can't transform, in which they just do a bunch of Buddhist dances hoping that that would make the humans go away, and eventually they just sail away on a ship that just takes them to their deaths. These are the last desperate attempts from a group of beings that have been fighting for so long. They're so exhausted from fighting against humans and are so frustrated by the lack of results that one by one they just give up. They just don't see the point in continuing this resistance movement anymore. They just don't have it in them to keep fighting anymore because what's even the fucking point of continuing? Therefore, after making one last attempt to save their homes in which they use the last of their powers and spiritual abilities to recreate the pure forest that used to be and was once their home before it was bulldozed, terraformed, and urbanized, they officially give up and face the music. The raccoons that can transform follow the path the foxes took, in which they permanently transform into humans and assimilate into their culture and the urban way of life. The raccoons that couldn't transform were either forced to live off garbage and scraps on the street, live in the public parks that were created as safe havens for the raccoons but end up being too small to provide for everyone, or move to other forests that haven't been touched by humanity where they will naturally have to compete with the raccoons that are already living there. It's a sad reality for these creatures as they pretty much lost everything: their homes, their culture, their way of life, and even their identities. Despite how hard they fought, they were ultimately defeated, and that's something that a lot of environmental movements and groups are forced to reckon with when confronting these issues. It seems like every year the powers of organizations like the EPA are being limited further and further by fucking pieces of shit assholes who are so concerned with getting ahead of the curve on trends in industrialization and technology that they view regulation and environmental protections as pesky annoyances that must be destroyed so that so-called captains of industries can continue maximizing profits under the guise of doing good for the people, I guess. It seems like every year more and more indigenous groups and marginalized communities are being threatened by far-right governments who disregard their concerns or strip away their rights because they want to kill wokeness or whatever bullshit they like coming up with. Pom Poko is a movie that is still relevant today because we see a lot of our growing concerns when it comes to stuff like climate change or cultural genocide being reflected in the events of this film. But as bleak as things are, both in the film and in our lives, Isao Takahata makes it very clear in the ending that we should never lose hope. The ending of Pom Poko is especially powerful because of how bittersweet it is. Yes, the raccoons may have lost everything, but they still have each other. No matter how bad things got throughout the film, they never forgot to live life to its fullest. They always had time to party, to sing and dance, to eat good food, to enjoy each other's company, to find love and romance. It doesn't matter if the future is bleak. If you're surrounded by the people you love in which everyone supports one another, then that alone is proof that you have not fully accepted defeat. That is proof you have the courage and strength to keep fighting on, to get up every morning and get through the shittiness the day has to offer because there's hope for a brighter tomorrow. Takahata wasn't interested in producing some fucking baby time fantasy tale where everything will work out for the characters and they'll end up saving the forest from the greedy, polluting businessmen like Illumination's The Lorax or Fern Gully or some shit, because that doesn't accurately reflect reality. But he also didn't want to make something dour and depressing where everyone loses because that also doesn't reflect reality. Life is tough, and unfortunately, we don't always win. You can take away someone's home, their identity, their culture, their way of life, but you can't take away their community and the love that spreads amongst that community. You can't take away their desire to live, laugh, and love. And even though they might not have the energy to keep fighting, they have the energy to at least keep living and trying to make the best of things. And to Takahata, that alone is worthy of celebration, and I wholeheartedly agree.